Hello and welcome back to episode 8 of the Visual Voices podcast. We're here today in the darkroom with Tom.
Hello.
And yeah, we've mixed up the setup. We're in the darkroom, your place of happiness, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm a vampire, so I hang upside down in the rafters when all the students go home.
Harry believed that for a moment. So I'd love to hear about what you're working on at the moment.
So, for my degree show, I've been just working on a project about monasticism, particularly about one guy called Joe McArdle, who started his life as a carpenter in Ireland in the 1950s. He joined the monastery at 22 years old, and then in the next 6 years, he then moved to Australia, where he lived the rest of his life as a monk, doing monkish things. And it also happens that he's my great uncle, so it's kind of the family kind of connection to it all, and trying to sensitively document monastic life, really.
And have you found that to be challenging, like having to document something where it isn't a space that necessarily welcomes a camera?
Yeah, that was one of the more difficult things, I think. But the way that I've found that's really useful and helpful is actually embedding myself in the community first. So, when I was in Australia, I was there for 2 weeks, and for most of the first week, I didn't take any pictures of people. It was all low-key, setting the scene, and actually, really, that was just buying myself time so that they really trust me, and that allowed me to get some more intimate portraits later. Focus more on the things that maybe people feel a little bit vulnerable around, or that sort of thing. So.
And with your final show, are you envisioning this as prints on the wall or a book?
Yeah, I think probably a bit of both, really. A triptych on the wall to kind of hark back to the kind of iconographical traditions of the monks and kind of that sort of thing. But then most of the work is going to be in a book, or maybe a couple. I've not quite decided yet.
Yeah.
I'm still working that bit out, but a couple of books that just take you through the story, I think, probably.
And with your process, have you felt that these images make sense in a book to you now because you've got them, or is a book something you'd envisioned at the start?
Well, I like photo books as objects. I'm quite attracted by them. They're quite interesting, and one of the first things I do when I pick up a photo book is I look at how it's bound, or I just appreciate the outside of it as an object. So I think with documentary it kind of suits the photo book. A lot of my favourite photo books are documentary projects. Especially in the more long form, it just gets a bit exhausting to have, so many prints on the wall. So I'm thinking 3 prints on the wall and then the rest of the work in the book to finish out the story.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see your work.
Oh,
Obviously,
thanks.
We've just been in the studio space in Backlit, so we've got to see it all up. And I love how you had is it called like a prayer?
It's a prayer kneeler,
kneeler. Yeah, that just sort of drawed me over to your work to take it and also view it in a different way as well. I think having objects there.
So I'm not entirely convinced about it yet. I might end up having it in my final piece, but I bought this prayer kneeler. It's like a kind of oak sort of prayer desk with a cushion on the back of it that you kneel down on. So I laid my work in progress book on the top of it, and the idea was partly to try and help people engage with the work. Almost if they adopt a posture of prayer, maybe they kind of get a deeper insight into what the monks are doing. It sounds really pretentious and kind of knobbish, but...
No, I don't think so. I like that. I think work that adds the contextual element into the actual viewing experience is something that brings me in as a viewer 100%.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to think about it as an installation, not just prints on the wall.
Yeah.
And so trying to help people connect more with the work, and if I can do that posturally with them in the kind of physical space that they're taking up, then why not give it a try? And I think experimenting in backlit has been really useful for my work and what I've been thinking and sequencing and stuff.
No, definitely. I can't agree more. I'd love to hear about how Because you're obviously a very passionate photographer. You're technically, really good. I know that you've helped me before, and you've got it nailed. Like, you understand the technical, especially like scanning. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about that.
You're
I'm
very
interested in
intelligent.
the tech, which I think a lot of people, they're interested in the images and the work and what it's saying, and I totally get that. I really am there as well, but I quite like the technology. I quite like fiddling and tinkering and making things work. So I guess
think
that's
that
kind
comes
of
across in your work, though. That playfulness with the technical ability has allowed you to, make those steps forward.
Yeah, I feel like this is one of my more straight-laced projects, though. I think I've probably done more experimental stuff in the past, especially with I did a whole series about power lines and kind of signals and that sort of thing, and I was really playing with the processing on those. But this is kind of straightforward color documentary, so I don't know. I think the biggest technical challenge has probably been the color film that I shot.
Yeah. Because you went all the way to Australia
Yeah.
to shoot.
I had to fight with the security guards in pretty much all of the airports that I went through.
Yeah.
The worst one was Melbourne. No shade on Melbourne Airport, but this one security guard got really jumpy about it, and the first one I spoke to was like, yeah, it's fine. We'll just hand inspect it.
Yeah.
But then their supervisor was like, what are you doing? And they were like, oh, we're just going to hand inspect this film. And she was like, no, it goes through the machine. I was like, please don't do that. X-rays have it's really small, basically a negligible effect really. But over a course of like, I don't know, a couple of exposures, you can start to see a bit of, junk coming through on the negative. And she was like, well, that's great because this isn't an X-ray machine. This is a CT machine. And I was like, oh no, this is even worse. Because a CT machine is like an X-ray machine, but it's like a 360-degree X-ray, so it gets so much more exposure, and a CT machine will cook film.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, that's worse. Please don't. So we went back and forth, like, I don't know, for 15 minutes, and the whole queue was piling up behind me. And it was eventually, I was like, look, I'm a photographer, this is my livelihood, please, you can't scan this film. And I think she looked at the queue behind me and was like, oh, go on then. And she was like, just this once.
Oh.
I was like, okay, next time I'll be, I made the whole show of it.
Next time I won't fly
yeah,
through Melbourne.
Exactly, yeah. So that was interesting. But
I'd just like to go on something there. You said, look, I'm a photographer, this is my livelihood. At what point did you start saying I'm a photographer? Because I think a lot of us are starting to struggle with that. Just the fact that we're not going to be students anymore. We're now, we need to start owning it. So
yeah,
do you have any advice for people on that?
Do you click a button on a camera? If yes, you are a photographer. I think everybody can call themselves a photographer. People make images on their phone, and there are people using their DS to take pictures and whatever in our class, and it's just like, that's photography.
Yeah.
You're a photographer. I don't know. It's like saying, I don't know. It's like a sport or a hobby or whatever. And do you do it? If yes, then you're a photographer. I think more people could just, it doesn't feel like such a big thing for me.
Yeah.
Because it's just something I enjoy doing. So, and also I was trying to puff myself up a bit in front of the security guard, and
well, it worked. So I'm glad.
Yeah, eventually.
And with your project you're working on at the moment, you said feels like one of slightly more safer. How has your photography evolved over the 3 years, and do you feel that studying photography in an academic environment has that shaped the way that you approach a project?
Absolutely. Oh man, this 3 years at university studying photography formally has been just great. I didn't study photography at A level or previously, so this is kind of my first brush with academic photography, and I love it.
Yeah.
It's my favorite part is just figuring out how work connects to each other, and how there's this web of work that's all being influenced by each other, and there are more obvious influences to some work than others, but you can start to build up this web the more you know about theory and history and stuff like that. You can start to see where photographers are coming from and what sort of dialogues they're contributing to. It's brilliant. It's fascinating to learn about all that stuff.
What did you come from before? Did you do like college, A-levels?
Yeah, I did A-levels, so I did English language and English literature, and then physics and maths.
Oh, wow.
So a bit of a split.
And so was photography a hobby or a passion at the time along the side?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been, I got into photography, I think it's probably holiday pictures that really got me interested in photography, taking pictures on holiday and just enjoying that process. And then one year my dad bought me whatever the entry level cheapo, the cheapest Nikon possible at the time was.
Yeah.
And I love that thing to bits. I think the D3300 was great. I had 2 lenses for it, and I don't know, I shot that thing for 5 years or something, just making work for fun and developing my own eye and practicing. And it was only during lockdown that I decided, I can actually make this photography thing work for me full time. Because I didn't know what I wanted to do when I left uni, so I took a gap year. And it was during that time that I figured out, photography kind of works for me and reasonably good at it, so why not try?
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that, and I think actually it's probably quite a relatable story, because I know that holiday photography is something where you do just have that time, right? To explore and create.
And I still do, every holiday I go on. Now it's just that the toys I have to play with are a bit nicer.
Yeah.
But it's something that I've really enjoyed doing with my family, and my granddad was into film photography. My dad, since I've been at uni, he's gotten back into film photography because he just is jealous of all the fun that I'm having.
Yeah.
So it's something that I do with my family and especially my dad. It's part of our relationship and something we enjoy doing together.
That's really lovely. I think it's really nice how creative stuff can bring, family and friends together in that shared process.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's, I think there's maybe with men it's a bit different to women, but I think and I'm not speaking for all men, maybe I'm just speaking about me and my dad's relationship, is that we communicate better when we're working on something side by side rather than a face-to-face conversation. That's more awkward for me. It's more kind of, talking about things face-to-face is just, I don't know. I'm more excited and interested and I feel like some of my favorite moments from our relationship have been when we're working on something together.
Yeah.
And we're kind of, that dynamic.
Alongside each other.
Yeah. And, maybe that's all about kind of, toxic masculinity. I don't know. My dad's not toxically masculine.
No.
At all. But
it can be nice to bond in action with
absolutely,
somebody.
Yeah.
And I think it's the camera provides a space of, it can almost be like this superhero cape. I know that when I'm holding a camera, I can be in an event and I can feel a lot more confident, because I'm here with a purpose. I am the photographer. But if I was maybe a guest at that event, I might feel a bit more socially anxious. But the camera in my hands gives me this anchor.
Yeah, absolutely.
And sometimes a bit of bravery. I mean, sometimes it makes me nervous because I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, but
I think it separates you a bit from reality. The camera. I don't think the camera is very good at showing reality as it is, but for a photographer, it kind of separates you from a moment, which sometimes is not what you want at all. So sometimes I'll just spend time in a moment.
Yeah.
And be like, oh, this would make a really nice photo, and then not bother taking it because I just want to be there. Yeah.
I love that.
But there's a separation from a moment that you have when you're looking through a viewfinder, and it's just, I don't know. It does give you that power and agency and a bit more kind of security in who you are and what you're doing.
Do you find as well, when I'm working on a project, so I know I think it was first or second year, we did a project called the something of sunlight, the beauty of sunlight, or something to do with something of light.
Yeah.
But I think I took it down the path of looking at like the way the sun like sparkles on different surfaces, and ever since then my eyes are drawn to that because it almost tunes you into a way of looking. So a project I'm working on, I'll see that in the world forevermore.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I totally resonate with that. When you start paying attention to things, you know, if you say, oh, this project's going to be about X, Y, Z, and you start paying attention to things, you start noticing and seeing more. Like, you know, I don't know, I find photography is almost, it can be useful to me in more ways than just producing. So, you know, you can express yourself by making work of specific things or whatever, and that's great. But also just having a camera. If I just had like a metal box with a like plastic window in it, that would help me see the world more, even if there was no photography involved, because it's just, you know, framing things, seeing that sort of stuff, and I really enjoy just moving through the world and looking. And almost that becomes like a prayerful experience for me. That becomes, you know, that's built into kind of my faith as a Christian and how I see the world, and just me, you know, just me and my camera walking around. Some of my most kind of, my deepest moments with God and in prayer is when I've got my camera. Yeah, I don't know, it's a good thing.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Love to touch on where you feel that you want to head next. You know, we're nearly graduated. Do you have a vision for your future, or are you just focusing on the now currently?
Oh man, every day is just you know, check what I'm doing that day and do it, and then that's about all I have headspace for. But I'm thinking about master's programs.
Okay.
Mostly looking at online stuff at the moment, talking to people, just figuring out what my next steps are. But I definitely like to stay in photographic education for longer, even if that's just a selfish desire.
Yeah.
And then also I'd really like to, I'm thinking about finding some way to start a community darkroom or something like that. I just inspired by a couple of the speakers that we've had that have been part of projects like that. And it just sounds like a lot of fun, and you know, maybe do that part-time and study part-time maybe is what my next year will look like, but really I have no idea.
Well, that sounds like an exciting idea currently. And thank you so much for coming to talk to us today.
It's all right, pleasure.
I appreciate, you know, your honesty and vulnerability. It's been a really good conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening, everyone.